Wonderful. I'll get my ugly face off there, and we'll look at some of the other faces of the people involved in the organisation as we go through. I won't tell you their stories necessarily, but suffice this to say, as you guys know, we would not be able to do anything that we can do without the people that are part of this program. So I'm introducing them along the way as we go. So very simply put, we know the pandemic has highlighted that a job for life is certainly no longer a guarantee. And what we're seeing and what we've started to see since we started this was that people need a safety net. They need somewhere to go. But that was really, really hard for them to find. Certainly, there are some government programs, but at the time that we started this, we were a job board originally, and I'll show the milestones in a moment. But I was working in the clubs industry. My background is airlines, hospitality, and tourism. My partner's in the arts, and I had just started a new contract after a period of unemployment in the clubs industry. And in the second week, that was March, obviously everything shut down and that disappeared. And so I kind of found myself sitting up late at night worrying about the future, as you do, and thought there's a whole bunch of people from my two primary connected industries that are probably about to go through something fairly big. And I've been made redundant a couple of times in my career, and I felt a fair amount of resilience. And what was it that I could possibly do to maybe help people? And literally the first thing that I did was I went to LinkedIn and I said, does anybody in my network have any jobs? And I got sent about 3,500 jobs in one afternoon, which was kind of incredible. It was pick and pack, it's manufacturing, but they were jobs, things to get food on the table. And so I started sharing that in some private Facebook groups for airline staff mainly, and artists and so on. And that kind of blew up really, really quickly within a couple of days. And we were all, as you recall, panicked and nervous and unsure about what the future was or would hold. And I thought, I need to get some scale on this, and I have no idea how to design a website, but I'll try. Reached out to a couple of contacts. We approached the likes of Seek and Indeed, and they weren't particularly interested. So I took an off-the-shelf job board, and we just started plugging these jobs in. And this was about 6 to 7 weeks before the federal government's central job hub existed. So that's what we focused on. And we, a few days later, were featured on media and started to get some traction because it was topical. And then literally on day 7, a random person, Rachel Mansfield, who's still with us, she's the people leader at IKEA. She reached out and she said, look, I've seen what you've done. I've got lots of time on my hands at the moment. Maybe I can help people with their resumes. And that really was the genesis of where we've come to, or who we are now as we read through that timeline. And, fast forward to July last year, we dropped the job board. I never wanted to be Seek, and I didn't want to monetize this. What I wanted to do was try and help people. And by that time, we'd amassed some 30 odd coaches and recruiters who also themselves still had jobs, but there was no normal work for them. It was all drying up. And they all wanted to give back. Everyone I've spoken to who's joined our organization has said to me, I've got a strong sense of community, of service, and I want to give back to people in any way that I can. So we really started to go, okay, well, if we've dropped the job board, let's start looking at the tactical help that people need. And we opened up to many more industries. And, fast forward again to October last year, we were registered with the ACNC, we were incorporated. And today we've got nearly 80 to 90 professional coaches and a very small team behind the scenes that all volunteer their time. Some do an hour a week and some do a lot more than that. And we've got 9 services essentially where we offer one-on-one career coaching and mental health first aid, really importantly. And we've seen a spike in that tremendously, which I'll talk to in a little while as well. But we still offer that resume service, but we've increased that to a skills conversation, to LinkedIn, to job interview preparation. And then we've also started focusing significantly on the mindset coaching. So we've got a variety of different coaches that are with us, from both business mentors, psychologists, and then the traditional recruiters and HR type people as well. So depending on what a job seeker needs, what they're after at a particular point in time, they come to us, they book online. We've got an instant or an automatic booking service. I no longer match people up to it. They choose what it is that they want. And, most people who are new to us, they'll choose a session which we introduced called Not Sure, Start Here, if they just don't know where to go. And that's a 30-minute conversation with one of our coaches who'll sit and listen to their situation, find out what the challenges are, and then make a recommendation. Now, that recommendation may not necessarily be to one of the other services that we offer. It may be to you guys. It may be to Lifeline. It may be in some cases to a GP for a referral. We're not a crisis service. We don't pitch ourselves that way, but we certainly, as you'd understand and be familiar with yourselves, we have emotionally charged conversations, and recognizing where our services end and where another professional or another organization should pick up is key and critical, and one of the things that we try and make sure that all of our coaches and volunteers are aware of, obviously. So people book in, they then can have the one-on-one. Everything is done in the cloud. So we exist only on Zoom. We have no physical location. We find obviously that was necessary for COVID times, but also we find that people like that distance a lot of the time, and somewhat anonymity that comes with video calls. It also makes it easy for our coaches to work, and we work around their schedule. So we offer usually 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. almost 7 days a week. That varies depending on when our coaches are available as well. And since October, November, we've also been running webinars. And I know Peter's been to one last week and is coming to our one tomorrow night. So we alternate them. There is either a Thursday night or a Friday morning every week. And we've got a variety of different subjects. Tomorrow night's our most popular, which is our resume writing masterclass and cover letter masterclass. You know, we speak to people from about 55 and counting industries around Australia. And we help anybody, no matter where they're located in Australia or what industry they're from. But we do tend to see a lot of people whose industries have been impacted the most, and that's hospitality, tourism, airline, and so forth, plus a whole lot of others. Recent migrants, we see a lot of those people who've come in, and in recent times we're also seen a spike in women who only entered the workforce 5 or 6 years ago. So they were raising the kids, they were primary carers and homemakers for a long time, only recently got into the workforce and now find themselves out of a job, but they don't have the same level of experience or resume that their cohort have. So these webinars that we offer provide really practical tips on some things which some of us might find very basic, but you know, we're talking to people who've been in the same organization for 20 or more years. They've not had to apply for external roles. They've not had to deal with an ATS or the automated systems that reject resumes even before a recruiter even looks at them. You know, technology has moved on. So helping people with things like that. We've got services or sessions that we run on how to create an all-star LinkedIn profile, and we're about to launch a free ebook which will be available on our website. And then recently, we've also added in obviously resilience, which has been a great tool or a great webinar. And now that people are getting jobs, we were also introduced a really popular course, which is the first 90 days. So the first 90 days in your new job, how to transition into a corporate culture if you're coming from, say, a service industry, the things to watch out for, you know, how to look after yourself as you make that transition, and all of the call outs that a lot of people have asked us during those webinars. We've packaged that up and we'll continue to develop those as we go through. But before we jump into this, I'm sorry, I don't have a clock in front of me, so I'm not timekeeping, John. I apologize. But you know, that's essentially where we're at this point in time. Is we're trying to reach as many people throughout Australia. And sometimes the language can be confusing. We had a board strategy day last week, which is terrific, refining our mission. And now that we need to be sustainable, and we need to continue to build great partnerships with organizations and people like yourselves, but to try and reach people, is that we need to be really careful that we don't use the phrase Australians in our marketing. And sometimes that happens inadvertently. It is anybody who is in Australia, who is seeking a job and has a valid visa or right to work in Australia. We're more than happy to work with them and to help them no matter what background they come from. We do occasionally get people from overseas contacting us. The technical answer is we can help anybody except if they're in the United States. Unfortunately, our insurer won't cover us for advice given to anybody in the US. But really employment markets are so varied across the globe that when we really do focus on Australia because that's where our coaches are from and they understand it. But we certainly don't turn people away. And we've also been helping a lot of expats who are waiting to return home, who are wondering what the market's like here, wondering certainly on the mental health and the mindset coaching side of things that extends beyond geography. So we do try and get to as many people as we can. And nominally, depending on coaching availability, we offer around about 500 hours a month at the moment, as I say, mostly 7 days a week, although they can tend to vary. Before we jump out into the breakouts, I guess the questions that may help guide some of that conversation, and I'm curious to find out your views and your answers on, is how is asking for help to find employment, I guess, related or different to asking for help around all sorts of other challenges? You know, a lot of the conversations that we have, and I'm not a qualified coach and I don't generally have the frontline conversations, but I do talk to our clients, and I've developed some relationships with our clients. And it's an interesting phenomenon that I've noticed how different our male clients are from our female clients, and how having some conversations with some of the blokes has been more challenging, and even getting them to talk about what's really keeping them awake at night, aside from joblessness and looking for a job, which is the obvious reason they might come to us. So a question around that I'm really curious to explore is, you know, is there a difference, and if so, what are they, or are they very similar, and are there common themes and things I can certainly learn and we can learn from one another? And the second there, as John suggested, is what mentoring support could you offer someone who is jobless, or job seeking, because they are two very different propositions, and there are different challenges, I think, that go with that.
Yeah, Ian, I think John and Ian have already said everything that they need. Well, that's it. I think it's a mixture between both helping or mentoring in regards to the technical skills of how you're going to do things, how are you going to approach things, and sharing the experience or whatnot. But then it's the other thing where there's a reason why they're seeking mentoring. But it's not only about asking about the technical stuff, but it's also they would have some of their own personal thing that we would need help with. I mean, either it's purpose, emotional relationship, or whatever it is that they're trying to seek. So I think it's just finding out, or at least what John and Ian were saying, just at least for us, we need to understand what they're trying to seek and then provide the help that they need through our own thing, or, through the collective of mentoring men. There we go.
Yeah, I think in terms of what I'd add is that there are some points that are quite specific to support for a job or career, but there are similarities with other helping challenges. I think the point that John was making, that when we consider the area of, say, soft skills, that can be applied to any situation and setting in life circumstance, not necessarily just specific to the job search, but or career direction. But when you look at the context of career direction and or job search, there are some functional things that you do need to consider that are specific to that form of help, whether it's around helping them with career direction, change, or execution, or finding and securing work. They're actually quite specific and functional. So,
any thoughts around around those comments?
Yeah, they're really salient, and yeah, there's a difference there, I think, between skill specific and the broader, but we do see a bleed or a crossover quite a lot, and one of the first issues that we tend to see, especially from guys, is and I dealt with this in a previous iteration when I lost my role. I'd been at Qantas for 16 years, was I no longer fit into a box. And so we speak to people every day around this, because my identity was attached to the job that I did or the company that I worked for. And so before you can even get to some of those technical skills, or even the transition soft skills and how to deal with different corporate cultures and all of those things I was talking about, is how do we actually deal with the mindset and relate to ourselves and to our families and to everybody around us without that identity that I had attached so strongly to it. And that's, then incorporates other things that, I feel I should be this as the breadwinner or you know, whatever the traditional thoughts are. So yeah, you make really good points there.
Yeah.
I found,
good. Yeah.
I found, Ant, that often when faced with that sort of situation, just enable him to step away from the role and the identity and perhaps undertake some self-assessment or self-awareness sort of exercises, such as perhaps as we do a lot of mentoring men, sort of look at personal values, and really as a way of just getting a sense of who you are that isn't necessarily directly associated with the work that you've been doing for so many years, because it's so much more common for men to associate their sense of who they are through the work that they do and the job title that they have. It's had been my experience. And the other thing I found was that there often can be other issues that can present at the same time that you're grappling with, other than just loss of job.
Yeah.
I think we kind of stumbled onto initially to question 2, but looking at question 1 and look, again, I welcome any comments that Victor has, or Phil or the like, that it depends a lot. We sit, it's all encompassing. We spend 1/3 of our life, in work. Yeah. So I think as someone, I think it was Anne that said that, guys tend to place a lot of identity in their work. I know that in the past, I've fallen out through, being made redundant before, and once it happened that it absolutely knocked me for 6 because I was so head into that work.
And that's interesting, isn't it? That's an interesting angle about the life stage that people are at, male, female, whoever, and the attitude then towards how they see themselves and the role that they see themselves being able to play in the workforce. That later stage. Is there a marked difference in terms of the sort of challenges or mental distress that people go through? Does that change with the different life stage that people are at? Have you noticed sort of trends in that area? Observation?
Yeah, absolutely, and those are really good points, and it does, and I think that there's another variable there which you guys are keenly aware of, and it's the stage of the grief cycle, I think, too, that each person is at, and their ability to then deal with the circumstance that they find themselves in. So we've got the two conflicting things there, and there are some sweet spots along that journey. But to the question, excuse me, it varies depending on the individual. So categorizing and saying, some of the guys who've been in the same organization or in the same job for a very long time can't transition and are more worried. That can be true. So, not to harp on it, but I look at some pilots. So what's happened in that community is highly trained technical people who are earning a significant amount of money had debt that equated to that, and suddenly that falls away. So we've seen them branch out into two different pathways. One is the ones that are going, oh my God, the sky's falling in, what am I going to do? And really sadly and badly, and one of the things that occurred to me when this all first started was when Ansett collapsed, there was Qantas, and Qantas picked up as many different Ansett people as they could, but unfortunately we still saw a rather high rate of suicide by Ansett staff and particularly pilots at that point in time. Big difference here, and the problem here is, well, there's no other airline to pick them up, so everybody's in the same jobs. But what we didn't want to see was that problem reiterate. So you've got that one camp, and they're in dire need of support, particularly on the mental health side of things. But then we've got a whole bunch of the others, so not to generalize, who've gone, absolutely, I'm going to use this as an opportunity, and they've become lollipop men, and they've seen this as an opportunity to perhaps spend more time with their families, and it has varied, as I say, depending on their personal financial situation usually. We do see a bunch on the other end of the spectrum who are worried about the casualisation, who are worried about underemployment, and John, you and I were talking about that in the break as well, and that's significant issue that has long been ignored. It's tracked, but it's not reported on terribly well. We saw at the beginning of the pandemic a whole bunch of people get jobs with Woolies, and there were some great PR stories that were coming out of that. We were turning cabin crew into Woolies people, and the DJs people doing similar things. And what's kind of dropped out has been the fact that a lot of them are no longer getting shifts, so they're only getting one shift a week, and so that is now presenting other issues. And so it is very much around, I need to put bread on the table, and I can't necessarily look at something that's holistic or long term. But where we do try and get people to move to is to use the hour that they've got with us every week or whatever it is, however long they're chatting to us, and try and direct them away from the immediacy of that panic and that cycle of grief and loss and shock, to looking at training pathways. And that was a great thing through this period with so many free training opportunities, or to step back and look at this as an opportunity to perhaps pursue a dream, or do something different, if the circumstance were good enough that the payout allowed you to do something like that. But it is individual, although those are the broad trends. You made a really good point there. The government says, well, we need lots of fruit pickers, and businesses are saying we need lots of people to wait tables. Well, I don't necessarily want to do that in terms of a long-term proposition. And the other thing to point out from our point of view certainly is we see a much smaller percentage of men coming to us. So it's about 70.
Oh, really?
And 70% of the people we speak to are women.
Really?
They tend to have a very different conversation and a different view, obviously. And the guys that we do speak to, it's all of those complexities. There's societal, there's familial. I was chatting to one guy last week, and he said he's now seeing things at home, and his wife's seeing him in a different way, and that's causing a complexity and drama in the home that didn't exist when he was just going out to the office every day, and she had her freedom, and he was seeing things from a different angle as well. And they've realized now that they're at a point in their relationship that they're not compatible, and they probably haven't been for some time, but now have been forced into this situation where they're living with each other 24/7, and so there's all of that added stuff there. And so it is important, although we obviously start the conversation around the job side of things and trying to help you there is it's critical for our guys to know about you, and the pathways to help guys have conversations and mentoring that is much more holistic, whereas the career is just one part of it.
Resilience, a common thread. Is that what you're saying, Ant? Yeah,
absolutely. And that's why we've added in mindset coaching and resilience webinars. But it is so critical, and framing it in the right way, though, in a way that doesn't sound hokey pokey, that doesn't sound like it's crystals and Instagram, that there are actual tools and techniques and people who can help you to be able to build that. And you mentioned it there, and it's something that I've certainly had to build up myself as well, and suffered from is that resilience. And the key there too, I think, as well, is getting people at the right point in that grief cycle, where they're open to it. I used to obsess at the beginning of this and look at the forward bookings for the next week. I've no idea why, because we don't charge, right? But I still wanted to see that people were using the service, and there'd be nothing in next week's calendar. And then you'd get into the week, and suddenly it was packed. And so it dawned on me that it's all to do with that cycle, and people wake up and they go, okay, I'm in a good frame of mind and I'm ready to talk to somebody about it today, tomorrow, or the next day. And they're not looking further than that, because they don't know that they've got the resilience to be able to see them through another 48 hours. And so that's why it is so critical to be able to access people and to be able to build that resilience, and you break down some of those barriers and through a relationship.
We talked a lot about how we can make people feel comfortable with the loss of identity. And that came up a lot and even the conversation that you guys were just having about resilience. And I feel you can't say resilience without mentioning pride. a lot of men probably don't want to talk about certain things because of their pride, which is also a reason why you have so many women coming to you, because oh my gosh, hopefully I don't ruffle some feathers, but like they will come to you in that space, whereas he probably won't.
But, that's why mentoring men is here, because guys do struggle with opening up and talking about vulnerabilities.
Look,
and
it's also why I wanted to. Sorry for cutting you off, John. That's actually why I wanted to get involved in this program.
I was at the local Lingfield market a couple of weeks ago with a pull-up banner, and a husband and wife came up. The wife saw the banner, immediately came over and opened up and started sharing the story about her son, a 20-year-old son, poor relationship, won't talk to the dad. The dad's standing 5 meters behind, feeling shame and just not looking over my way. And the wife opened up, and it's this thing that men have got. Ultimately, when I shared a bit of my own vulnerability, he came closer, took more of an interest. It's the 70%. What an indictment. I'm assuming that there's probably as many men unemployed looking for work as women. And it's just this thing. They need to go and watch Brené Brown video around vulnerability and just learn the strength that they can get from that. If an organisation puts off a relatively large number, say 15 or more, the organisation has to provide support like recruitment advice, counselling and all that sort of stuff. But if it's a small number, they're under no obligation. If it's a large number, in a way, you've got a peer support. You've got a bunch of people in the same boat and you can support each other. Whereas if you're smaller numbers, it's a lot harder. I was going to ask, given your growing influence and I guess your observations, could you be an advocate to try and look at the current system and maybe look at how things could be improved and where changes are required?
And we're looking more and more at that. So now that this is sort of settled, and I was saying I'll come back to the latter point. Yes, there is outplacement. There are very different levels of outplacement. And I've experienced some, and no doubt many on the call have as well, as have the people that come to us. So you're only going to get as good an outplacement as the package that the employer has purchased, and quite often, unfortunately, that relates to your seniority within the organisation as well. So they can be good. I certainly don't want to tar everybody with the same brush, but by and large, there's not a huge amount, or in my personal experience, I didn't get a lot other than being able to commiserate with my fellow, the same people that I just left the organisation with. We used to meet up in the city offices, and I'd have a chat to my career coach or my mentor there, and in the end, we were just having coffee and we weren't actually getting much value. Some people got an enormous amount of value out of it because they got to do the tactical stuff and LinkedIn profiles and resumes, etc. So it varies quite a lot. In terms of that, and you're absolutely right, there is a huge gap in small to medium businesses, and they often want to do the right thing, and we're seeing, and we're having conversations with lots of those employer associations and super funds, funnily enough too, because they want to look after their people and it's in their interest to do so, but they just don't have the resources. These are small businesses, family businesses. They're trying to hang on as best they can as well. So never mind an obligation, they just simply can't afford to look after their people. So there is a gap there. And I spent, to the latter point, I spent 2.5 hours with Service New South Wales this morning in a workshop as they try and figure out what to do with Careers New South Wales, which was part of the Gonski report. And then the Premier announced about 3 weeks ago, she dropped a bombshell surprise that Careers New South Wales was going to solve this problem. And as it turns out, as we all know, they've actually no idea how they're actually going to do it. So they got together employer associations and chambers of commerce and providers and like ourselves this morning, and far too many people from government to go, how do we holistically do this? And that's what we've been saying to government, is that fundamentally the model is actually wrong there. And we do need to look at a more holistic solution, whether we can advocate effectively enough for that. But, I hope we've got insights that can at least drive some of that conversation and see some change. Yeah. I was just going to say, JobActive is such an interesting and complex beast in and of itself, and we see so many people, and again, I don't want to tar everybody, but there are a lot of people who poorly represent that program, unfortunately, providers, and we see so many of them. In fact, we've had some JobActive providers bring their whole class or their clients to our webinars. We caught them out doing that a few weeks ago. Thanks very much for the vote of confidence. I really appreciate it, but you're being paid per one of these clients that's coming to you, and you're outsourcing the training to us. We need to have a separate conversation about why that is actually happening, as much as I want to help people. And there are a lot of really, really good providers there. So really interesting, because I'd love to see that whole model improve, and it can improve drastically from the churn and burn, where there are people who are just going, I'm going to put you in any job because I'm going to get paid per head, and the more disadvantaged you are, the more I'm going to get, is wrong and doesn't fundamentally look after the job seeker.
Right. It's interesting that JobActive and the mental health structures that that have systematically let down the sector around the edges. Right? They, in the Lived Experience Australia report, they call it the missing middle, and I think that's still true, whether we're actually talking about employment challenges or we're talking about mental health challenges, right? I think the missing middle gets missed, right? So the most extreme people are taken care of, the noisiest or the least bothersome or the most advantaged in that group do. But the most of us who go through will feel unsupported most of the time, or inappropriately supported, right? So that there's a distance or an obstacle to us getting what we need to actually make progress. So I'm thinking, like the mental health sector at the moment, where the noise is starting to turn from why aren't you offering programs, government, to government, you shouldn't be offering programs, you can't do it properly. How about building a framework where lived experience, community-based, on the ground, frontline troop type organisations that have come up and have been operating on the smell of an oily rag, doing the work that's been missed anyway, should be funded and should be supported and should be included in any framework. Is that something you could see for the employment sector as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And they're exactly the conversation, or almost word for word, in some of that. That we've been having at a board level and with other people, but figuring out how you actually have that constructive conversation with government before it actually lets too many more people down and the whole thing actually implodes and impacts on real people's lives at the end of the day. And that's the urgency and the criticality around it, I think.
Add a fact that I imagine, and you've already spoken to TAFE New South Wales about their programs of re-education and their free education bases for people that are in job sectors that are in need, and people that are coming from mental health backgrounds as well. It's part of the mental health plan that TAFE New South Wales will actually pay for them to do a course, which is just free education. And, knowledge is power. How good is free education? Also, it gives somebody a purpose, a drive, and a reason to get out of bed in the morning.
Yeah, absolutely. And what TAFE's been doing has been fantastic. And we'd love to see that
they've changed up so much in the past couple of years, and they've really stepped up to the plate.
Is the pace of need slowed down? Has the problems you're trying to solve sort of evolved and changed from how you originally formed and came together? What's it looking like for you?
Really interesting question. It's slowed down in some sectors, or the demand has slowed down. The urgency has slowed down in some sectors, but it's sustained in others. So, we're always there will always be a need, despite some really good and thankfully better than expected market trends at the moment. We were talking this time last year about 10% ongoing for potentially the next 10 years in terms of unemployment. And so we're sitting about 5.5% now at a national level anyway. Other issues like underemployment, casualisation, etc. continue. So we're certainly seeing that we don't have people knocking down the doors as much, and there's no wait lists, and everybody's getting seen to. But what we're starting to see more and more trends are the people that went into alternate employment on a temporary basis are now starting to really question and have deeper conversations and meaning of life conversations about, okay, if my industry is not going to come back as I had hoped, yes, I've got something that's bringing in dollars at the moment, but now what do we do? And it's those higher level or high purpose conversations that are happening more and more. So, you know, and we're still seeing lots and lots of people, obviously, from those original industries. JobKeeper ending was interesting because it created more of a real situation. I think we could see some more of the reality around what businesses were going to survive and which ones weren't. So yeah, it's ever changing, I think, but there's a persistent and consistent theme that comes through, that there is still a lot of demand and a lot of people don't know where to go to get help. Are
you seeing the demon of ageism coming out?
Yeah.
And if so, and how do you get people to deal with that?
It's there in bucket loads, and it's a topic we had a blog post, one of our coaches talking about it the other week, and it comes down to that resilience thing again. Unfortunately, it comes around to advocacy and changing employer perceptions, and that's an uphill battle. There is no easy answer to that, and that's where the mental health, unfortunately, comes in to try and help people through. And we've got a number of people in that boat who, despite years and years of skills and are awesome and amazing, are coming back now more and more for that support, because what am I doing wrong? I'm trying everything. I'm taking all the advice. I'm writing resumes that beat the ATS system. I'm doing X, Y, and Z, everything that we recommend, and unfortunately, it really just does come down to that. So that's a pervasive issue that I wish I had a better answer for. All we can do is support people through that journey and continue to try and, you know, have those conversations that help them along.
The differences that you've experienced between men and women, because that might be quite a how should I put it, illuminating thing to contemplate. Yeah, and it may help in mentoring in terms of quite how you approach a problem. For example, if it's men are standoffish, well, if it's been ticked as flagged as a definite by your own experimentation, it would be interesting to see that. Only a short list.
Usually, a lot of the gentlemen that come through is that they'll either be completely standoffish and defensive, or the other way entirely, and they open up completely once they realize it's safe. And that's and we get a lot that come through from the webinars, because webinars are a safe space. I can have my camera off. It's not confronting. I don't have to have a one-on-one conversation with a coach or a psychologist or anything like that. And they, you know, have a chat. And David Vincent, the guy who was on one of the slides at the top, usually runs them. And they start, you know, the conversation that they usually have with me is, this is a real human, and I started to relate to these people, and then I decided I'd, you know, have a one-on-one conversation. And it's progressive. I find that a lot of the conversations that I have with women are around, what do I need to do in order to get the job I need some help on, the job interview that I've got coming up, and what I need to wear in order to do it, and all of the very strategic type things, whereas we're having much higher level conversations with guys. You know, there's a bloke in Melbourne who's been on and off with us for quite a few months, was very senior overseas, came back to Australia, couldn't get a job. His wife's left him, taken the 5 kids. He's now in social housing. There's so much more there, but it's taken a much longer time to unpack. And we're not, again, necessarily the right organization. You know, he should be having conversations with you guys, but you know, it is around his job, so you know, we tend to come in and out of that. So, but what I will do is get some better and deeper insights, because I think that there's a lot more there, and come back to you.
And some people just aren't good at doing interviews, and I just In many cases, they might have just not been for an interview for years. They just had this one job for 20 or 30 years. And I think there's some skills that can be picked up, and I'm assuming that would be probably covered by some of the things you're doing now. But the things to say, what not to say. Don't lie, but put a positive slant on the things that you experience in that. So
yeah, you're absolutely right. The job for life thing, even in the public sector, doesn't exist anymore. But yes, there's a specific job interview preparation session that we run. And we do ask, ideally, whilst we can do a general one, if you have a job interview coming up, and we can actually role play the specifics about it, because so many people haven't been through a behavioural interview for a very long time. That they've progressed through their organisation either because of seniority or their network, or even if it's been through a normal application, the interview process inside an organisation is very different, and you know that business backwards, and so you answer questions very differently as well there too. And there's a webinar that we present on job interview skills as well, which is specifically around that. This is how to help us, and essentially we want to get more people through our doors that we can help. So any of your mentees and anybody that you come across in general life who might find what we do and deliver of value, whether it's the webinars or one-on-one, or indeed if they wanted to learn how to become a part of the journey with us, more than happy to have a catch up with them and a conversation. The team are only too happy to help as many more people as they possibly can. I couldn't possibly afford the coaches if I was to run a commercial model here. So keep us in mind. Visit our website, Project Displaced, and get in touch with me if you have any questions. I'd love to continue the conversation. So again, thank you for having me.